Hey class users, here's another do-it-yourself report recipe. Recipe number 4. This one's worker caseload, open representation services. Let's take a look at it. And the best place to look, of course, is on the class online training guides here. Click here from your message board. You'll land here. We want to go to reporting and accountability. I click a little triangle. Down here under do-it-yourself reports, the DIYs, we're going to have the recipes listed as we build them, and there'll be quite a few as time goes by. I'm going to click on this one because this is the one we're going to be doing right now, and we can scroll down. You might have a little trouble seeing this, I realize that, but essentially we've got workers in this column. We've got open services. We can see an open date. We have a service type, the client name, and the service status. Now, both the worker name comes from the assigned to field, so you'll need to be assigning your representation services to the person working on it. You'll also need to use the service status, which not everyone uses, we know, but it is a good idea. So for representation services, there are 2 fields that will be useful for you to use if you want to be able to have lists like this. So how do we build a report like this? Well, the instructions are up here, so I'm going to walk through that and we'll see how we go. All right, as usual, we go to reports and accountability, and we're going to click on reports. And the one we want is a DIY service client report. So I'm going to look for DIY, and this is the service client report. So we're going to click on this. Now, the first thing we do is we're going to save it, and we're going to create our own new one. And you really want to make sure that you've got a good naming convention, so you won't just end up with a whole bunch of random things over time. So you might want to stick with what we're suggested, which is worker caseload, and maybe rep services 1. All right, and you can put in a description there, and we can save these services. So we'll save and close that. And now it's opened, so we're no longer dealing with the original template, which is useful. You don't want to muck with the template. Here we go. So we're going to right click and head to show field list, and this always unfortunately comes out a little bit small. Highly suggest you drag it and pull it right open so you can find the things you need a lot easier. All right, first thing we're going to do is drag one at a time in an order. First thing is assigned to, which is actually how we can find our workers. So we're going to drop that into this section here, the drop row fields. Okay, so at the moment we've only got the one, but we're going to do a number of them. So this actually means that the first thing that this whole report's attached to is the worker names, or the people that are assigned to. And what we build now after this, so the far left column is the one that decides how the list is going to look. Then the details are things that are attached to that worker name. So the next one we're going to do is work with services. So we're going to do service ID and drag that next to it. Now we can see the 2. The next one, we're going to go with open date. And again, put it in next to it. We'll go with service type next, under S. And of course, these are fairly common things you're going to need. And I'll go first name, last name next. This, of course, is of the client, not of the worker. Looking for F. And the last one was the service status, as I mentioned. All right. And next, we want to select the following field and drag and drop into the drop data items here, which is above this area, number of a service. And that's going to be a service count based on these things. Now, moving along, we're going to set additional reporting dates drop down on the left to service open date. Okay, so here we go. Okay, so I just want to stop to talk about these additional reporting dates, or additional reporting date options as they are from this drop down in the left-hand filter panel in all the DIY reports. Basically, we have to divide it up. There are 3 options that you can see. The first one's a service date completed services. Then we've got service open date and service close date. We'll go into a little bit more detail about this in another video, but essentially what this tells us, it tells the report what date to look at when pulling the data from class. And in this case, we need to use the open date only because we want to see services which may not have a completed service date or a close date. So we select that. That's the additional reporting dates. So this is important for us to be able to show currently open but not closed services. Now we want to set funding categories to all in this case. We're going to set a small initial date range just to test the report. So this is a good thing to always do, maybe just the 2 months, end date today. Now, you should get yourself familiar. You can actually change to rolling date ranges. The date range is the default, which gives you a start and end date, but you can say, oh, today, tomorrow, previous 20 days. Every time you come back, it'll roll onto the 20 days prior to when you're opening the report. So that's an example of a rolling date range, and you can see a bunch of them there. In this case, we'll stick with the date range, the standard one. Now we're going to load this report and see what happens. I'm going to close that just so we can see what's happening here. We can see at first we've got a bunch of services that have not been assigned, and then that's followed by the different services that have been assigned to these demo workers. So we can actually see that this has actually worked quite well. Again, you can also see that our service status here hasn't been used unilaterally, so you may want to choose to use that in more detail. The other thing, I might just move this so we get a little bit more room. We can see the number of services that are in there, and we can see the amounts as well as the total. So that's worked as well. The next thing we want to do is make sure we're filtering to the right service type. So here we can use the filter on the service type, and by right clicking we can take out anything that we don't want. So I'll keep court tribunal, no duty lawyer. We'll keep the FRPs, no information, no legal advice, no legal tasks. So as you can tell, I'm just going for representation services. Okay, and then we can save that, and you'll see that they will filter and remove anything other than the courts, the other tribunals. That seems to have worked.
So another option for filtering here on the rows, like we've done here in service type, and you can see this one's filtered because the little champagne or half champagne glass is actually darker. We could leave this as is. This could be a very useful report for our supervisors, or we might just want to make one single report for each worker so the workers can go back and see their own list. And to do that, we'll go back to assign to, and we can click on this filter here. Again, the little champagne thing. Remove show all and just select the worker, maybe just this Phil Byrne character. And now we've just got the single list of that worker's open services. Now we could just go and save that again, or save as more specifically, and say this is worker caseload Phil Byrne, and we could go back and do it to all the others as well. So in this case though, I'm going to show you how we're going to get rid of that. We can simply click it again, and we can show all and save, and that brings us back to where we were.
So next, we know we've got it right. We can increase the date range, say, to the beginning of the year, and we're safe to get a better indicator of what's happening. The reason we do it that way is so we don't make a massive mistake and realize that it's pulling data that we didn't even need. So we do a little test with a small date range first. So that seems to be pulling things quite nicely. Of course, another option we could have is just like, say, the last 12 months to date, and that'll blank those out, and we'll load it again. So this will give you open cases from the last 12 months.
So in these circumstances, we can use the service status field, and if it is being used consistently, well, that's an easy way to view open casework. But we acknowledge, as we've said, not all centres use this field. So you may want to use the close date field as well, and that would be an option for some centres. So let's add that in. And I just snuck that in on this side, and that's quite interesting. We can see that that one's marked close and there's a close date. That's good. But we can also see a second service here that's got a close date, but it hasn't got a service status. So this service is also closed, but we weren't picking it up because the service status field just simply wasn't completed. Well, we can either leave the close date in place here and see both to make sure, or there's an alternative way. We can actually drag close date from here and just filter from the top here. This actually creates a filter mechanism that is not part of the columns that you want. And here we can actually use the filter on this for the options, and we can say unselect all but actually show blanks. So in other words, we only want to show blanks if they've got something like a date in here, any form of date. This will filter them out and remove them, ensuring that we only ever get the open services. So that's taken anything else away. So a couple of options there, depending on how your center uses the system, whether you use service status date. Generally, of course, closed services are marked by that close date. So this is another way to get to that And again, if we don't want that as well, we can just simply hide this field and it'll bring us back to where we were before.
All right, when we're happy with that, we can save this report. And this will basically lock this in. Now we can make this available in the reports to the creator, but we could also use the sharing button to share with other people on a role or a user-based basis based on your class permissions. There's another video that explains the sharing functions. So I'll close this now. When we refresh this, you should be able to find my new report. In fact, what will come back into reports, and I'll search for worker because that's what it was called. And there it is, worker caseload, rep being representation services. You can call it what you like, but again, I remind you to try and keep the names in a manner in which you can find them quickly later. So you want a consistent system. This tells us what the original report was from. So that's the template we lifted. We can click on that now and we should be able to load that. And sure enough, I'll just open that again. It's given us that report. So that is the recipe. Thanks for listening.